Welcome to the deep dive. We're about to try and cut through a mountain of information from just one day, August 13th, 2025. And this wasn't just any day. It really felt like the world was spinning on, well, multiple axes at once. Major news breaking everywhere. So, our mission here is to take this stack of sources, Reuters, AP News, the big ones, and pull out the really important stuff, connect the dots you might have missed, and basically give you a shortcut to being properly informed about what was, frankly, an extraordinary day.
Yeah, it really was unique. And what our sources show is just how many pivotal global events were happening simultaneously. And they weren't really isolated. We found these threads, linking high-stakes economics with complex geopolitics, even some surprising science, and these really urgent humanitarian crises. By the time we're done here, you won't just know what happened on the 13th, but hopefully why it matters and, what ripple effects to keep an eye on.
Okay, let's dive in then, starting with global geopolitics. August 13th saw, well, two pretty significant flashpoints. First up, that high-stakes diplomacy around the Trump-Putin summit. It was scheduled for Alaska on August 16th. But on the 13th, Trump issued this really stern warning to Putin. He talked about very severe consequences if Putin didn't take steps toward ending the war in Ukraine.
Right. And just to give that some context, this war had been dragging on since, 2022? Previous ceasefire attempts had all stalled. And on that same day, August 13th, European leaders, German Chancellor Merz was mentioned, and President Zelensky of Ukraine, they were laying out their own terms. They were really emphasizing Ukraine's security guarantees, its agency in any deal. Zelensky actually cautioned Trump directly, said Putin was bluffing, and insisted Kyiv had to be at the table for, any real talks about territory or security.
And the economic side of this was huge, wasn't it? Markets, diplomats, everyone was just watching for any signal. Could this stabilize energy and green flows? Or would it trigger, more sanctions, more escalation?
Exactly. And the deeper question, I think, is about trust. I mean, can any deal actually hold without solid, lasting guarantees, especially given Putin's track record? It's this very delicate balance, guarded optimism on one side, but huge risks of escalation on the other.
And the geopolitical tension didn't stop there. Let's shift halfway across the world to the South China Sea. Things flared up there, too, on the 13th. We saw a direct confrontation near Scarborough Shoal.
Yeah, Scarborough Shoal, it's kind of emblematic, really, of China's broader maritime claims, the whole nine-dash line thing. Claims that were, by the way, rejected by that international tribunal back in 2016. So on August 13th, there was apparently a collision, Chinese vessels trying to block a smaller Philippine ship, and then the U.S. briefly sent two warships near the shoal.
Right, and China immediately pushed back. Beijing's military claimed it had drove away the USS Higgins, though the U.S. didn't confirm that specific claim.
And looking bigger picture, Washington and Manila were already talking about additional coastal missile deployments, trying to bolster deterrence there. Other allies in the region were urging calm, basically warning that these close calls just keep raising the risk of miscalculation. And that's in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, remember?
So from military standoffs to, economic ones, there was another really interesting development involving U.S. efforts to control sensitive tech.
That's right. Sources were revealing on the 13th that U.S. agencies had been covertly putting location trackers in some shipments. Specifically, servers and AI accelerators they suspected might be diverted, illegally to places like China or Russia. Apparently, hidden inside components from major manufacturers using NVIDIA, AMD chips, that kind of thing.
Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty aggressive tactic. It really shows a more aggressive, intelligence-driven approach to export controls, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. But it also raises a big question. Okay, maybe it deters some of these gray market flows, but how does it affect U.S.-China tech tensions overall? Could it make foreign buyers start inspecting everything much more closely, maybe even switch suppliers? It could definitely complicate the global AI hardware trade.
And moving to yet another flashpoint, Iran. There was a joint statement from key European powers that really made waves on the 13th.
Yes, officials from Britain, France, and Germany. They basically threatened to snap back sanctions on Iran if it didn't meet its nuclear non-proliferation obligations. Iran's foreign ministry quickly pushed back, rejecting the threats, calling them politically motivated.
So the upshot seems to be a hardening tone from the E3, right? Yeah. And the outcome now probably depends on what back-channel talks, future U.S. involvement, maybe. It just highlights how tricky preventing nuclear proliferation still is.
Absolutely. A persistent challenge.
Okay, let's shift focus now, bring it back home to the U.S. August 13th was also a day of some pretty significant and definitely controversial policy moves here. Maybe the most surprising was President Trump initiating this extraordinarily rare federal takeover of D.C.'s own police department, the MPD.
Yeah, that was major. On the 13th, the plan was for federal officers to start patrolling D.C. around the clock, and the National Guard presence was ramping up too. Over 400 troops deployed under a specific part of the Home Rule Act, Section 740. It's rarely used for local policing like this. They'd already made over 100 arrests since this crackdown started. Many are firearm offenses or targeting undocumented immigrants.
And this move, plus there were reports of plans to move homeless people far from the city, well, it drew immediate backlash. Sharp rebukes, as the sources said, from local leaders, advocacy groups, and there seemed to be real confusion over who actually commands MPD. Was it Attorney General Pam Bondi, like the White House said, or still Chief Pamela Smith under the city's charter?
Right, and this isn't just about D.C. Critics were immediately warning about potential civil rights harms. They were also questioning the justification, the crime rationale, especially since some stats were actually improving. And Trump himself hinted this could go beyond 30 days, maybe even use D.C. as a model for other cities. That's a prospect that's almost certainly going to face legal challenges, not to mention political blowback.
And speaking of changing how things are run, the administration wasn't just focused on policing, they were also looking up towards space, a big move to ease rules for commercial spaceflight.
That's right. On the 13th, Trump signed an executive order. It told the Transportation Department and the FAA to basically eliminate or expedite environmental reviews for launches, and also remove some outdated restrictions on launch and reentry licenses.
Pitched as a big growth catalyst, right, for companies like SpaceX and other emerging launch providers, boosting the U.S. lead.
Yes, that was the argument. But, there's always another side. While supporters see it helping the U.S. stay competitive, critics immediately raised concerns. They warned that cutting reviews could increase environmental and public safety risks, especially thinking about these new, really big rockets being tested near sensitive areas.
Okay, another big regulatory change on August 13th. The White House revoked a Biden-era competition order.
Yeah, that 2021 order was aimed at boosting competition across a whole range of sectors, agriculture, tech platforms, lots of areas. Revoking it signals a new antitrust posture. Officials call it pro-growth and deregulatory. But consumer advocates were quick to warn it could weaken efforts to curb market concentration, big companies getting bigger.
So, practically speaking, what does this actually mean? Does it change things overnight?
Maybe not overnight, but it could definitely influence how agencies set priorities and maybe how arguments play out in court. It could also create more divergence between the U.S. and Europe on enforcement. Since Europe tends to be stricter on antitrust, that affects global companies.
We also saw a couple of cultural policy stories bubbling up on the 13th, especially with the nation's 250th birthday approaching.
Right. The White House ordered this extensive review of how Smithsonian museums and similar places present history, looking at displays, texts, curation. The stated goal is to ensure exhibitions accurately reflect U.S. history and values. They said they'd involve historians, educators, community leaders.
And at the same time, President Trump announced the new Kennedy Center honorees. Some big names, Gloria Gaynor, Sylvester Stallone, plus plans for major renovations there. There was enthusiasm for the choices, sure, but some commentary noted a kind of hand-picked feel, maybe reflecting certain political priorities.
Interesting times on the cultural front, too, then.
Definitely. Okay, let's pivot now to the economy and emerging technologies. Big news from Wall Street on the 13th. Markets hit record highs. S&P 500, NASDAQ, Dow all up. The S&P and NASDAQ actually closed at new highs.
Yeah, and the main driver seemed pretty clear. It was that cooler July inflation report. It really strengthened the belief that the Federal Reserve would probably start cutting interest rates in September. So that rallied the markets. It was described as a classic risk-on situation. Bond yields went down, the dollar softened, and the gains were broad too, which was interesting. Included small caps, cyclicals. That often suggests growing confidence.
But there's always a but, isn't there? Strategists were also sounding a note of caution, saying valuations are stretched, and that whether this rally continues really depends on growth and what the Fed does after September. There was even debate about the September cut itself. Should it be 25 basis points or maybe even 50? Quarter point or half point? The data was still a bit mixed.
Always that uncertainty hanging over the market.
And related to future industries, a really crucial story.
Yeah.
The U.S. making a big push on critical minerals.
Yes. On August 13th, the Energy Department announced about $1 billion. That's serious money. Aimed at speeding up U.S. projects all along the critical materials value chain. the stuff needed for semiconductors, batteries, advanced manufacturing.
And the why here seems pretty straightforward, right? These minerals are a known strategic choke point.
Hmm?
The U.S. has relied on imports for a long time, so this is about reducing those geopolitical risks and supply shocks.
Absolutely. Industry definitely welcomed it. But environmental groups immediately chimed in, urging rigorous safeguards. It really highlights that ongoing tension, doesn't it, between moving fast on clean tech and ensuring environmental protection, that speed versus stewardship dilemma.
And sticking with energy and tech, another big push, nuclear power,
Right.
specifically small reactors.
Right. The Energy Department named 11 projects for a pilot program. The goal is to build these small test reactors and get at least 3 operational, achieving nuclear criticality on a really aggressive timeline. And a big driver for this, it's the huge growth in energy demand from data centers, AI workloads. They're really straining the grid.
So what's the main argument for this kind of fast tracking?
Well, proponents say it can help de-risk these newer nuclear technologies, build up domestic supply chains faster.
Hmm.
But skeptics, they point to some pretty big unresolved hurdles. Things like getting licenses approved, producing the special HAU fuel needed, and just the manufacturing capacity to build these things at scale. Lots of challenges still.
Okay, let's turn now to some of the more sobering news from August 13th, humanitarian and environmental crises. The conflict in Gaza tragically intensified even further. Israeli strikes were reported killing large numbers of Palestinians, and Prime Minister Netanyahu signaled Palestinians would be allowed to leave areas that were going to be targeted in an upcoming offensive push.
The impact on aid was just devastating. That's what really stands out. Shipments from the WHO, other groups reportedly getting turned back, often over labeling issues, other technicalities. The result, warehouses, roadsides just clogged with supplies that couldn't get in. Reports from Gaza itself mentioned over 25 civilian deaths just at aid distribution points. People desperate for help.
Yeah, the rising death toll, this aid chokehold, it just deepened the fears of famine. Relief agencies were condemning it, saying far, far more trucks needed to get in daily to prevent a catastrophe.
And connecting that to the diplomacy, mediators in Cairo were pushing hard for a ceasefire, trying to open up humanitarian corridors. But the sources stressed that distrust on both sides remains high. And the Israeli military, the IDF, was reportedly gearing up for a bigger campaign, aiming to occupy Gaza City, root out Hamas, recover hostages. It pointed towards a potentially very long, very brutal next phase.
And just a tragic reminder of the dangers faced by migrants elsewhere, another deadly incident near Italy.
Yes, off the coast of Lampedusa, a boat carrying nearly 100 people capsized on August 13th. At least 26 confirmed dead, others still missing. Just awful.
And these tragedies always reignite the same difficult debates, don't they? About European burden sharing, the need for safe, legal migration path, the role of rescue ships.
Exactly, an ongoing crisis in the Mediterranean.
And from the sea to land, wildfires were just raging across multiple continents on August 13th.
Yeah, Southern Europe was hit hard. Spain asked the EU for help. Temperatures hit 45 Celsius there. That's about 113 Fahrenheit. Portugal had bad fires near Trancoso, forcing evacuations. We saw images from Greece, Turkey, flames getting close to homes, factories.
But what really struck me was that Canada was also facing severe fires at the same time. Manitoba reporting environmental damage, aquatic life affected by smoke, and over 20,000 people facing evacuation orders in Newfoundland and Labrador. Huge numbers.
And consistently, authorities and experts were linking this to climate change, calling it a risk amplifier, warning about the mounting cost to tourism, agriculture infrastructure if these kinds of intense fire seasons become the new normal. It's a global pattern.
And the U.S. certainly wasn't immune to climate-related disasters on the 13th either.
No, sadly not. Deadly storms hit Chattanooga, Tennessee. A family of 3 tragically killed when a tree fell on their car. There was widespread flash flooding there, too, from over 6 inches of rain in a short period. And at the same time, a dangerous heat wave gripped millions from Alabama up to New Jersey. Over 20 million people were under flood or severe weather watches. Just immense scale.
And as if that wasn't enough, Tropical Storm Erin was intensifying out in the Atlantic, raising concerns all along the East Coast, warnings about coastal flooding, dangerous surf, potential power outages, millions bracing for impact.
Yeah, these events triggered emergency declarations, naturally, and renewed calls for more investment in climate resilience. But they also highlighted, again, these gaps in preparedness and the disparities, in who gets aid and how quickly across different communities.
Even way up north in Alaska, the climate impacts were really stark.
Yes, near Juneau. Rapid melting of the Mendenhall Glacier caused the Mendenhall River to crest at a record high, over 16 feet. Fortunately, they said some recently installed barriers did protect many neighborhoods, which is good news.
But climate scientists pointed to this as a really worrying trend, didn't they? Predicting these kinds of glacial outburst floods will likely become more frequent as warming continues, a clear warning sign from the Arctic.
It's a very stark warning.
Okay, but it wasn't all crises and disasters. August 13th also brought some genuinely incredible scientific breakthroughs and some shifts in daily life, too. Let's talk about this discovery that seems to literally reshape our understanding of the human family tree.
Yeah, this was fascinating. Researchers reported finding 13 fossil teeth in Ethiopia, dated to about 2.65 million years ago. Now, 10 of these teeth belonged to two individuals of a previously unknown species of Australopithecus, and three others were attributed to early Homo.
Wow. So the big deal here is that it shows multiple different hominin species were living side by side in the same place, same time.
Yes, exactly. Coexisting in the same landscapes, probably competing for similar resources, exploiting overlapping niches. It really complicates that simple linear picture of evolution. The work, it was published in Nature, it strongly supports more of a branching bush model of human evolution, which implies, competition, maybe even cultural or technological interactions between these different groups that ultimately shaped why our lineage eventually became dominant. It's a fundamental shift.
And another story involving science solving a long-standing mystery.
Yes, the body of an Antarctic researcher who went missing way back in 1959 was finally discovered, found in a remote glacier region after 66 years.
It's just incredible, providing that long-awaited closure for his friends, family, the scientific community. A cold case finally resolved.
And it really makes you think about technology, doesn't it? How advances in things like satellite imaging, tracking technology, how they made finding someone after so long in that environment even possible. It's quite remarkable.
Okay, shifting gears now to daily life. Digital freedoms. Russia made a pretty significant move on August 13th affecting messaging apps.
Right, they started limiting voice calls on Telegram and WhatsApp. The official reason given was accusing the apps of failing to cooperate in fraud and terrorism cases. Text messaging still worked, apparently, but WhatsApp calls specifically were reported as nearly unusable from around August 11th onwards.
So, what's the bigger picture here? What is the signal?
Well, digital rights groups immediately warned this is part of Russia's push for digital sovereignty. Basically, more state control over the internet within its borders. Often that comes at the expense of user privacy and free expression. And it could potentially foreshadow broader blocks or restrictions if these tech companies don't comply with government demands down the line.
We also saw a story highlighting some cross-border cooperation against organized crime.
Yes. On August 13th, Mexican authorities transferred 26 alleged cartel members to the U.S. They stressed it was in response to U.S. requests, not some kind of bargaining chip in trade talks or anything. And on the same day, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned people and businesses linked to a timeshare fraud scheme. That scheme was reportedly tied to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the CJNG.
So it really underscores a coordinated push, doesn't it? Trying to hit the cartels financially and disrupt their leadership. Though analysts did warn, as they often do, about the risk of possible violent reprisals, even while cooperation is being touted.
Always a risk in that situation.
And just a stark reminder of ongoing violence challenges within the U.S. as well.
Yeah, sadly. On August 13th, reports came in about a young woman killed in Louisville, Kentucky, while just escorting a child to a bus stop. And separately, 3 people died in a shootout outside a casino in Reno.
And these kinds of incidents invariably lead community leaders to renew those calls for action, right? For gun reform, for more investment in violence prevention.
Yes, those calls were definitely being made again.
Okay, on a different note, a consumer safety alert that affected quite a few households on the 13th.
Right. Dollar General issued a nationwide recall for its Clover Valley instant coffee. This was after reports came in about unspecified health issues. It apparently led to temporary shortages for a lot of their customers.
So, what does a recall like this tell us beyond the immediate safety issue?
Well, food safety advocates, they praised the quick action by Dollar General, but they also used it to call for, more rigorous oversight of supply chains generally. It kind of reignited those debates about corporate responsibility and how transparent consumer rights really are, especially with complex global supply chains.
And finally, potential travel chaos looming. Air Canada was bracing for a strike on August 13th.
Yeah, the airline honestly was planning to start canceling flights because its flight attendants were preparing for a possible walkout. A full strike, they said, could happen as early as the following Saturday.
That obviously sparked immediate concern for travelers, tourism officials. Labor leaders, meanwhile, were defending their demands: better pay, better working conditions, setting the stage for some major disruption.
Yeah, looked like it could get messy.
Wow, what a day that was. August 13th, 2025. I mean, from record stock highs and this incredibly tense international diplomacy to truly profound scientific discoveries, and then the stark realities of climate change, social challenges, it really just demonstrated how interconnected everything is, didn't it?
It really did. And this kind of deep dive, I think it shows how events that seem totally separate often share these underlying currents. Whether it's climate change showing up as fires and floods or that complex dance between technology, geopolitics, and human rights, it just reinforces that idea that understanding the so what behind the headlines, that's really key to navigating the world we live in now. It's evolving so fast.
So, as you, listening, reflect on this snapshot of just one single day, maybe consider this. How might these seemingly isolated events from August 13th, 2025, how might they continue to ripple out through your own life, through the world around you, in the weeks, months, maybe even years ahead? Which of these threads will become the really defining stories of our time?
Yeah, keep asking those questions, keep digging deeper, keep looking for those connections. There's always more to understand, and grasping the nuances, well, it just makes us all better, more informed citizens of the world.